Hello everyone. In this video, we will discuss some important one-liner questions of Thomas Hardy. So let's start our video. Thomas Hardy was born in 1840 and he died in 1928. His first novel was The Poor Man and the Lady, who conferred the Order of Merit on Thomas Hardy, George V, in which year Thomas Hardy announced that he would not write fiction again in 1896, who wrote a feminist reading of Hardy, Patricia Ingham, who wrote the novel The Well-Beloved Hardy. What is the name of the Thomas Hardy's first wife? Emma. Thomas Hardy was apprenticed to an architect at the age of 16. He had written 1800 poems. The alma mater of Hardy was King's College, London. Thomas Hardy's first collection of verses was Wessex poem. In which novel of Thomas Hardy has a character in which a man sells his wife? The Mayor of Casterbridge. What name did Hardy use for the area in the South England where most of his novels take place? Wessex. Wessex is a place in South England in which most of his novels uh, were based. Thomas Hardy took the name of Wessex from an old Saxon kingdom. Who wrote Hardy, The Offensive Truth? J. Godey. Hardy was the son of a mason. Hardy was first educated at village school. Who wrote Jude the Obscure? Hardy. Hardy's second wife Florence Dugdale was younger than him. How much year younger than him? 40 years. From 1920 to 1927, Hardy worked on his autobiography. Who published Hardy's autobiography after his death? His second wife, Florence Dugdale. Hardy died at the age of 87. First poem of Hardy was Domicilium. Hardy had a child from his niece. Hardy received honorary degrees from Oxford and Cambridge. The famous tragedy of the Queen of Cornwall is Hardy's verse poem. He had wrote 14 novels in all. The novel Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Hardy was published in 1891, and at first Thomas Hardy wrote anonymously. Anonymously means without using his name. Like Dixon, Hardy's novel was published in serial forms in magazines. Thomas Hardy challenged many of the sexual, religious, and societal conventions of the Victorian age. When was Wessex Tale by Hardy published? In 1912. During his last year, Hardy remained for most of his time at his house in Dorchester. Who wrote The Return of the Native? Hardy. Last novel of Hardy was Jude the Obscure. The moral choice is everything in the work of Hardy. So the basic theme of Hardy's work was moral choice. And he won the Institute Prize in 1863. Thomas Hardy had become agnostic by the age of 27. Who wrote A Pair of Blue Eyes? Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was sensitive to the issue of class. Thomas Hardy focused less on plot and more on character. He uses techniques of episodic structure. Controversy over the moral stance of his novel led Hardy to abandon novel writing. There was a great outcry against Hardy's novel. Which Hardy's novel? Jude the Obscure, and it is his last novel. Which poem of Hardy deal with Napoleonic wars, the dynasts? The theme of the novel Jude of Obscure is sex and marriage. Who wrote the novel Under the Greenwood Tree? Hardy. How many novels were published by Hardy between his first success with Far From the Madding Crowd and the publication of Jude the Obscure 11? Thomas Hardy arrived his secretary Florence Dugdale after the death of Emma, his first wife. Thomas Hardy destroyed the manuscript of which novel after publisher rejected it? Answer है The Poor Man and the Lady. The first popular novel of Hardy was Under the Greenwood Tree. Hardy's autobiography was published in 1928 and from the beginning of his career he usually wrote autobiographies. The name of Thomas Hardy's father was also Thomas Hardy and he was a Manson, who is known as the last of great Victorians, Hardy. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin had attended Thomas Hardy funeral. It is true or false? It is true. What happens to Tess in the novel Tess of the Jubervilles? She is hanged. What is the subtitle of the novel Tis a Poor Woman? Which novel of Hardy first gained notice? Far from the Madding Crowd. Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy first appeared in abridged form in Harper's Magazine. Who wrote an essay on Hardy? John Bailey. Thomas Hardy won which essay prize? The Reba Essay Prize. By the last 2 decades of his life, Thomas Hardy had achieved as much fame as Dixon. Who wrote the life and work of Thomas Hardy? Michael Milgate. Human situation in Herman Hardy's novel is controlled by fate. Hardy's novel, which is extremely simple in plot, The Return of the Native, Thomas Hardy was buried without his hurt, the real hurt. Thomas Hardy prioritized his poetry above his novels. Thomas Hardy was a skilled architect. Hardy was an ardent believer in Charles Darwin, which theory of evolution. Hardy had no children. Hardy was very influenced by Wordsworth. In which novel Thomas Hardy reflects the new spirit of science and industry, The Mayor of Casterbridge? The Georgian poets viewed Thomas Hardy as their mentor. After Thomas Hardy's death, his poems were lauded by Ezra Pound, W. H. Auden, and Philip Larkin. Hardy belonged to which literary movement? Naturalism. Who is the hero of the novel Jude the Obscure? Jude. And who is the heroine? Sue. Thomas Hardy was a late Victorian. The novel Tess is a tragedy. Jude the Obscure was published in 1896 and it is his last novel. The first published work of Thomas Hardy was How I Built Myself a House. Hardy's first published novel was Desperate Remedies. Thomas Hardy was a novelist and poet, and he preferred poetry to novel. Thomas Hardy is one of the writers who best represent the tradition from 19th to 20th century, and he was a naturalist, and he he was writing at the era of Victorian era. Thomas Hardy paved the way of 20th century novelists such as T. H. Lawrence, who made working class characters central to his fiction. Thomas Hardy was born very small and thought at birth to be dead. What was Tess' full form? Teresa Jubervilles. Tess is often compared to which animal? Deer. Which countryside is depicted in the novels of Thomas Hardy? Wessex. So this is all about some very important one-liner question of Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was a novelist, a poet, and he wrote so many novels, and he preferred poetry to novels. And he was writing at the Victorian era. Jude the Obscure, it was his last novel, and there are so many important one liners, questions, and answers which I have discussed in this video.